Hi, everybody. This is Coach Aaron Saft in the Running is Life podcast. Today's guest, as promised, is Justin Walker. Justin is a Hardrock finisher, and we're going to get into the training leading up, everything Hardrock. Really fun, deep conversation. Pretty long conversation, too. I really enjoy talking with Justin on it. Hardrock is, of course, one that is near and dear to my heart. So really, since I got to experience Hardrock, we were kind of able to, go deeper and discuss more about the course and everything. So this is a really in-depth conversation. And I want to thank Justin for all his time, because we recorded for almost an hour and a half. So I hope you really enjoy this conversation with Justin. Afterwards, I'll catch up with you guys and we'll talk about everything else that's going on in the world of running is life. I want to thank my guest, Mr. Justin Walker, for being on today. He's a busy man, so I appreciate him coming on. Justin, we got a little bit of a back and forth before we started, but why don't you start with introduction of Justin Walker and where he came from.
All right. Well, dude, it's so awesome to finally get down and sit down and chat. So, my name is Justin Walker. Currently live in Salida, Colorado. So, right in kind of the middle of the Rocky Mountains. I grew up in Oklahoma, so didn't grow up trail running, but somehow found the trails to be home. So I've been, I don't know, doing ultras for a little over 10 years, maybe 11 years.
Okay.
And finally got into Hardrock this year. So I think I had four Hardrock qualifiers, or five, 4 or 5. I can't remember now, before I got in. So
right on. Where did that journey start? What did you start qualifying with?
My first was Wasatch, back in 2016. So, but I did not. I had such a bad race at Wasatch. Just the heat. I don't know if have you done Wasatch?
Yeah, I did it last year, and
okay.
Yes,
Oh
it was
yeah,
awful.
dude, the heat. Yeah, and then I got so cold at night. That's probably the most extreme temperature change. But I did it, and I was like, I am not ready to put in for Hardrock. So I don't think I put in. I didn't put in until, was it the first day? It was a 20. So 2019 was the snow year. 2020 was COVID. So I think officially I was in 21. So I got in like relatively quickly, but I also had like volunteer credits I get at the aid station captain.
Yeah.
Because my captain does not run, and she awards me with the aid station captain ticket. So
nice.
Basically doubles the tickets.
That's cool. Yeah. What made you want to do Hardrock?
Dude, the San Juans feel like home to me. I love the mountains down there. They're just so big and so remote. There's not a lot of people down there. So I've been going to the San Juans for basically since I ran Wasatch. I've been trying to go every summer. I've only lived in Salida for 3 years. And then before that, I've just been traveling up here to the San Juans to spend time there. And that's really just being out there and being on the course. Like, I don't know, the course is so big and so hard, and so many big long climbs that I think, it tests the limits of, an average person like myself's like endurance and your mental capacity. So I think that's why really it was just to test myself on something super hard.
Some of my listeners aren't familiar with the course itself. So can you just give a little bit of background about Hardrock, like some of the numbers, gain, descent, all that good stuff?
Yep. So it's a big loop in the San Juan. So you start in Silverton, Colorado, and the direction I ran it this year, you run to Telluride, then to Ouray, and then the west of Lake City, and then back to Silverton. So it's 66,000 feet of change. And realistically, it's kind of 8 giant climbs that get you your 33,000 feet of gain. You go, I think, over 12,000 feet or 13,000 feet 5 times or 6 times or something. And then you go over 114er in the middle of the race. So just incredibly high race. I think it averages like a little over 11,000 feet, your average elevation. So it's just super high and super up there, above tree line for a lot of it,
Yeah.
a lot of steep descents and ascents. So it just tests you mentally, it tests you physically. Yeah, just such a tough course. I love it.
And you said this year it headed in, you know, X direction. Why did you phrase it like that?
Each year they flip the direction, so they go clockwise one year, and then they'll flip it and go counterclockwise since it's a loop, and that makes it an entirely different course. I mean, I think you did it the opposite
I
direction that
did.
I did,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Yeah.
Which I think is a harder direction because like they kind of what do they call it? Ladders and chutes. So one direction you have your steep uphills, and then you have a few more runnable downhills,
Yeah.
which is the way I had it. So technically, it's a faster direction, but I believe you went the opposite direction. So you kind of had the gentle ups and then the steep downs. So I mean, it kind of I guess it plays to people's strengths. If you're a good technical steep downhill runner, I think you'd like that. But I think I preferred this direction just because I'm a little better hiker than I am runner right now. So I think it suited my strengths a little bit better.
And you mentioned like after Wasatch, you didn't feel like you were really prepared to put in for Hardrock. What did you do thereafter that made you feel a little bit more comfortable with putting in for Hardrock?
Well, at the time that I did Wasatch, I grew up in Oklahoma, so I was living in Oklahoma when I was preparing for Wasatch.
Gotcha.
Um, and I think that was probably the hardest part was just not living in the mountains.
Sure.
Like there are hills, but our tallest hill was 180 feet, so I did that on repeat over and over and over. Um, and so I think just the big long climbs and the altitude allowed me to not be fully prepared as living in Colorado. So I knew to really be ready for Hardrock, I had to be in the mountains somewhere. And I've lived in Colorado for over 11 years, over a couple of periods. Um, and I think just moving to the mountains allowed me to train a little better, do longer
Yeah.
climbs,
Yeah.
more than 180 feet.
Yeah.
Um, and then just experience too. I think doing something like Hardrock, I mean, what they call it, like a graduate level
Yes.
100-mile race.
Yep.
Um, I think you have to have your nutrition figured out, like an A plan, like okay, this has worked in training, and then also you figure out, okay, that didn't work. I started throwing up. So then you have a B plan. It's like, okay, I'll go to soup. I'll drink Coke at the aid stations. Like, so I think figuring out like your nutrition and then training a little bit better. I think those things allowed me to feel like I was ready to do another Mount 100. I think my second one was um, Bighorn in
Oh, cool.
Wyoming,
Yeah.
and like notoriously muddy race.
Yes.
But I felt a little bit better. I actually was living in Kansas at the time for that one. Um, and then my third qualifier was actually Cruel Jewel, and I was
Mm.
actually living in Salida at the point, and had a much better race. And ran it with some friends and just had a really good experience. And so then I knew at that point I was ready because I think Hardrock was my 10th completed 100. So I felt like I was finally ready to give the big one a go.
Right on. Very good. Um, so an interesting sidebar. You've coached people yourself, and we had a conversation, and I want to say it was kind of like mid to late winter, and you were kind of deciding if you wanted to have a coach. But what was your thought process in that, and what were you thinking? Because you're like, I'm not really sure because I know how to coach myself. A lot of people are in that boat, and what made you lean towards getting a coach?
That's a great question. Obviously, yeah, I was going back and forth with it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've coached for years and obviously been running ultras now for, a good long time. And I think the biggest thing for a coach to me is a good person. So like that's like number one for me. And then B, like knowing their stuff, right? Is like someone that's experienced in ultra running. Like if they were a road running coach and they were trying to coach me in ultra, I don't think I would trust that process. Granted, they probably know what they're doing, but I just, being a coach myself, I want to 100% trust the coach I choose. And of course, in choosing you, Aaron, you've run Hardrock too, which is also very important just to understand like how beastly that course is and how hard the
Yeah,
loop is.
right.
Um, but I think the biggest thing for me is I will be in my own head of like, am I doing enough? You know, am I doing too much? And I think when I coach myself, and I feel like a lot of people do this, um, you do too much. And I feel like coaches either most of the time pull back the reins on people because we want to do too much in
Yeah,
general,
right.
especially if you're doing something big and scary. Um, and then the other is, you know, some people need, you know, need some motivation and need you to push you. But I feel like a lot of, especially endurance athletes, need a coach to pull back the reins. And training for Hardrock, I think I would have done too much, and I think I would have been fried at the start line. So,
Yeah.
so I think that's why I chose to have you coach me is A, the experience, and B, a good human, or reverse those, good human, the experience. And then C, just to get out of my own head.
Sure. You also had some challenges leading up to it. Early on, there was still a lot of snow in the higher elevations, so it was like hard to get up pretty high, to get ready for Hard Rock. Plus Salida, all that was available was kind of your tenderfoot. We saw a lot of, and you can describe tenderfoot to the listeners. I got to run it when I was out there, so I got to see what Justin had been uploading to Training Peaks all the time. But um, talk about that, the drawbacks of having that snow at higher elevations, and especially like late into the training cycle.
Yeah, I mean that living in Salida, we're at 7,000 feet, so it's like ideal training. And most of the year we have like in town we have good training, but we have the Sawatch mountain range like right next to us where you ran high low this
Right.
year.
Right.
So great training, lots of 14ers. We have 11 14ers. However, this year we had a low snow year until May, and that's like, you know, you're getting into peak training. So we had a very heavy May. We had several big snows which really clogged up the big mountains. So I wasn't able, like, my plan was just to do Mount Chavano as our closest 14er. I was just going to do that on repeat, like 3 times a week was my goal. Like, probably too much, but you probably would have gotten on to me. But the snow kept me from doing that. So we have in Salida, we have a couple little trail systems, but one is like we call it the S Mountain Trail System or Tenderfoot Mountain, and it's a little 500-foot mountain that's just right next to town. So, and it's got a little spiral on it, so it's very, yeah. If you're looking on Training Peaks, it's very obvious. And then there's a couple other peaks that freed up after the snow. So Pano is one, and then Antler Knob. So I would just do those on repeat, which is, I mean, it's good mental training. I mean, I'm sure you know a lot of listeners understand like you don't have great, you know, climbs like right next to you, but you can do something on repeat. And, you know, I'm lucky enough that, you know, Tenderfoot's 500 feet, Pano is 1,000, and Antler Knob is 1,600 feet gain. So I was able to get decent climbs, but, so yeah, I think that was probably the most challenging part was we have all these 14ers like right here, like 20 minutes away from my home. And I couldn't get on any of them until like a week, maybe 2 weeks into June, which is only a month out from Hardrock. But yeah, I just had to trust the process, trust the coaching from you, that you know the base was there and that the work was there, and get out of my own head. Again, that's why I got coaching.
uh, you had you had used I would almost call it schemo during the winter to kind of get some vert and some going out to Monarch and going and doing a few loops on Monarch, and you can describe to the listeners Monarch if you like, which also helped in your base, and you also trained for a marathon too, kind of in that base period. Can you talk a little bit more about your base and what you were doing and what kind of led into the training that you and I did together?
Yeah. So I had planned on doing a marathon in December, and it was kind of short notice, but I've actually never raced a road marathon. I've done like 60 or 70 ultras, but I've never raced a road marathon. It also just scares me because it's like that very fine line between like speed and endurance that you like put together for a 3 hour block or whatever your
Right.
time is.
Yep.
And it just scares the crap out of me. Like, so I finally just committed. I was like, I'm gonna do it, but I kind of piled up the training a little too quick and had a little bit of an injury, so I ended up bailing on the marathon. But had a nice speed block, which I think helped fitness a lot. And then we have in Salida, we have Monarch Mountain, which is a ski resort, independent ski resort, which is awesome because they have pretty open uphill policy. So they have a couple of routes. You have one route before hours, and then you have two routes during hours. So they actually let you go uphill during hours, which anymore is harder to find in a ski resort. And then after hours, it's completely open, so you can go anywhere from 4 to I think it's 10 p.m. But so very fortunate to have that. And this was the first year last winter I had a skimo setup, so very lightweight uphill setup, kind of made for like ski racing. And I had friends from Hagan that hooked me up with a really nice ski setup, uphill setup, and was able to do. I think I went to Monarch 45 times this winter, so from December through kind of March timeframe. And would do multiple laps. Monarch is a smaller resort, so it's only like 1,000 feet of uphill. But allowing myself to be up at 12.8, getting low impact vert in the winter, after an injury too, really I think set a really nice base that we could work on, training for Hardrock. So yeah, I was actually logging it, but I stopped logging it because I was going so many times. But yeah, if I went 45 times and I probably averaged 2 trips per, maybe a little bit more. So that's 90,000 feet of vert on the skis. Um,
It's
and
awesome.
yeah, so doing that just I think really helped set the base for us to just do kind of long and slow as
Yeah.
we got ready for Hard
Yeah.
Rock.
Yeah. You also had some residual plantar pain, which like posed a few challenges, especially in the build. Obviously, I want to get to Hard Rock, but I think setting the the stage for everybody gives them a fuller picture of leading up to it. Um, we did a 50K that was in Oklahoma. Was that right?
Yes.
Right. Yes. So we did a 50K. Um, and the planner was okay. But we had to kind of just be careful with it because we wanted to do the 50 miler, right? And the 50 miler, if you want to touch on the 50 miler and talk about what transpired there.
Yeah, so the 50 miler was in I think the second weekend of May, down in New Mexico in Los Alamos, called Jemez 50 mile, which is like a notoriously weather sensitive 50-mile race because it's um in it's pretty high mountains. I think you get up to around 12,000 feet, which the course usually has snow on it because it goes through a ski resort. But the weather, yeah, this year was we had thunderstorms, so it was kind of warm. There was actually a tornado a couple of miles west of the course at like 11,000 feet, so a very rare tornado occurrence. But they end up canceling. They end up diverting runners, so only a handful of like the fastest people got to finish the 50 miles. I think there were 6 or 7 official finishers. Um, and a lot of us, they just at aid stations, it's like, okay, turn down this trail and then take a left at this trail. And they would tell you kind of what way to go because you would get off course. And they were just trying to get runners to the finish. Um, Officially, still, there are no results from the race because I don't think they know how to handle the
Yeah.
results. I mean,
Yeah.
I ended up with, I think, 34 miles or something for the day. So, yeah, not ideal mentally because I didn't get a 50 miler in.
Sure.
Um, Yeah, so not the greatest race for me.
Um, but we also discussed because there was another 50-mile option, but they weren't going to allow poles, so you decided not to do that one. But it would have been a good replication of Hard Rock. And which one was that?
That Quad Rock in
Quad Rock.
Fort
That's right.
Collins was this is the same day. Yeah, Quad Rock. But they didn't allow trekking poles because it was a loop and it's a kind of a front range race, so there's a lot more people in it, and they just didn't want interactions between people finishing their first loop and then the faster people going out in their second loop. So that's why I chose Jemez the same weekend. But yeah, obviously I didn't get the 50 miles.
And a sidebar, you brought up the tornado. Do you want to talk a little bit about your storm chasing background?
Yes. So growing up in Oklahoma, I was very accustomed to severe weather and tornado warnings and taking shelter in our storm shelter. And our storm shelter growing up was like separated from the house. So it wasn't like in the house. So we had to like go outside. And I remember just from like being a little kid, like we'd be like, "Oh, tornado warning," and we'd have to go outside and go to the storm shelter. Um, and early on, I just remember like there would be like hilling or it would be like the calm right after a storm, and I would like open the door and like poke my head out to see if I could see whatever it was. And now my mom would always be like, "Justin, get in here," like. So I was always super curious about weather, and especially about tornadoes and severe weather. And so, anyways, fast forwarding to young Justin, I went to school for meteorology. I went to the University of Oklahoma and did meteorology for like 8 years, and I was basically a paid storm chaser. I worked for a company called Center for Severe Weather Research based out of Boulder, Colorado. And basically, we were a government funded agency to study like severe weather. So that meant tornadoes, meant hurricanes, which you're having a hurricane close to you right now. We did lake effect snows. We did cloud seeding on the Continental Divide in the wintertime. To even we did a clear air project in Germany. So yeah, I did a lot with weather, but it that was such an intense job that it defined me. So I kind of officially say I'm retired from meteorology, except for like when something fun comes along. So National Geographic did a film called Extreme Weather a few years ago that I was a meteorologist in, like doing tornado research. And then just recently, I did the new movie. They came out with a new Twister movie called Twisters. So I ended up helping film a lot of the background weather for that. So I had a film team that went out with me, and we'd get as close to tornadoes as possible. But they had like shot lists that we needed to get for the film. So I ended up helping with that. So I come out of retirement every once in a while. But as we kind of talked about in the training for Hardrock, I didn't want to do it because it makes me have to spend a week or 2 weeks out in the plains, which really takes away from training, especially for something like Hardrock. And I ended up doing that, even though I said I wouldn't. I ended up going out for a week right before Jemez, and that just I was really tired going into the race, and that like cemented in that I did not want to do it anymore. And that was the first week of May. And I think I was also super tired going into Jemez,
Yeah.
and which
Well,
was good, mental training. But
yeah. Well, yeah, you could talk about that week a little bit. Like, what did it entail? Like when you were trying to chase the storms and such. Like, because
yeah,
you did not sleep.
no, I did not sleep. So typically, it's kind of a marathon, or maybe an ultra, I guess, when we go out. So I worked until 6 p.m. on the night, and then the film crew drove out from Los Angeles that day, and they met me at Albuquerque at midnight. So I had a 5 hour drive down to Albuquerque, New Mexico. And then we had 2 more hours we put on. So we got into eastern New Mexico that first night, and we rented a room to take a nap in. So we took a 3 hour nap and then woke up and drove 8 more hours to get in position for like day one. But as kind of people could maybe understand, like a trough moves across the United States, and that's what kind of brings severe weather. So when it's in Oklahoma one day, the next day it's in, 2 states east because it's moving, ejecting eastward. So we chase all day and then we have to drive, many hours into the night to get it ready for the next day. And so then you do that on repeat. So typically, like when we go out, there's a couple of troughs or what we call a long wave trough that has like a lot of little embedded waves inside of it. So yeah, it's a bunch of driving. I think we did, geez, I don't know, probably 3,000 miles of driving in a week. So just an insane amount of driving. So not only like sitting, which I typically don't do because I manage a running store, I'm on my feet all day.
Right.
It makes the body really stiff. But then diet is just terrible because you're grabbing fast food. Like the best thing to eat when you're chasing is Subway, but when you eat that on repeat, Subway gets a little old because I eat a lot of veggie sandwiches from Subway. And I'm mostly vegetarian too, so it makes it a little bit harder when you're out in the plains because everything is pretty meat centric out there. So sometimes I'm just eating French fries, as a meal. Well, 2 French fries and a shake or something, a chocolate shake. But yeah, so it makes it incredibly difficult to have a healthy lifestyle and then B, train. So after that one trip before Haymans, I was just like, I was like, no more storm chasing because I need to put all my eggs into the Hardrock basket.
Right on, right on. And you just mentioned the last piece that I wanted to make the connection for everybody is the run shop you work at, 7,000 feet running company. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Okay. And you're a shoe connoisseur. So you went with normals. You're gonna have to say the model for me.
Yep. Sharak
There
and the
you
Tomer.
go.
Yeah.
What went into that choice? What were you thinking when you went into that choice? Because I know like you were kind of torn because of the upper. Why don't you get into that whole like discussion that you
Yeah.
and I had about the footwear?
Yeah. So one thing which we didn't really touch on earlier is I've had plantar for like 10 months now. So we've managed it with like lower efforts, not a lot of speed work. So one of the big things with the shoe choice is I can't do a lower drop. So like the 4 foot to heel drop, I really need it to be like 4 millimeters or greater. And that's one good thing about the normal shoes is they're 6 and 8 millimeter drops. So that helps not stretch my like posterior chain as much, like my Achilles and my calf. So it gives it a little break. So it helps with the plantar, and it's just in my heel like a sharp knife, like a dull butter knife that's hot. That jabbing in there is kind of the pain of plantar. If you haven't had it, it's uncomfortable. So it limited some training, but so the shoe choices, that was a big factor for me. And I've trained with the normals. I love the normals. They just make trail shoes, so they're really focused on that trail market, and that's at 7,000 feet in Salida. Like that's 80% of our sales are trail shoes. Um, so I have the luxury to try a lot of shoes, and that they just work the best the normals. So I chose. So like if you think of Hardrock, it's a big loop, and the bottom half of the loop is very wet. So lots of river crossings, muddy areas, swampy, like marshy areas. So I knew that part, the bottom part of the race, I wanted a shoe that drained well. So my choice to start the race was in the Sharak, which is a little bit lighter shoe. So I think it's 19 millimeters up front and 25 in the heel. So it's definitely lighter cushion, especially for myself. Like I usually like more cushion, but it just drained well. So I chose to start with that shoe. And then once you get to Telluride, so kind of the upper part of the loop, I switched to the Tomir, and that is probably my favorite shoe. So it's kind of a medium cushion shoe. It's an 8 millimeter drop, and I think it's 20. Is it 22, 29, or 20 something like that? But the thing with that shoe is the upper is very rigid, so it's very rip resistant, so it makes it very durable. But in that same fashion, it does not drain well. So one of the training runs that we did, I dipped my feet in the creek every time I went by. So it was 2.5 times up one of the big mountains outside of Salida. I think it was one of like the 11,000 foot vert days that you had me do. And that felt great. The shoe did. But afterwards, when I took my shoes and socks off when I got back, because I felt like it was draining well. And I was like, all right, this is going to be my shoe. Well, when I took my shoes off, my feet were all white and pruned. And to that point, I mean, I'm sure you've seen, and some of the listeners have too, like when your feet get soggy, like they get bad after that. So I knew seeing my feet, I was like, okay, I can't start in that shoe for sure. So I chose to do the first 30 miles in the Shrak, which drained well. And then did the middle 50 miles in the Tomir. And then actually the last 20 miles, I ended up using a Nike shoe, the Zagama. But it's only a 4 millimeter drop. So I actually kind of last minute, because I wanted to use that shoe, I had in my ski boots when I had plantar over the winter, I had a little heel lift in it. So just like a half arch support. And that gives you probably 3 or 4 more millimeters of extra heel drop. So I ended up putting that under the insole, the standard insole on the shoe. And that shoe worked great. It drains really well. And that last 20 miles in this direction, as you know, and it's very wet, lots of crossings, like lots of boggy, marshy area going through the willow trees and stuff. So yeah, that was kind of my choice on the shoes, which for any race, but especially Hardrock, I think it's an important, like having your shoes drain, having the grip, is so important. So those are my reasonings for my shoe choices.
You mentioned earlier that you volunteer at Hardrock. How familiar were you with the sections of the course? Have you been on most of the sections prior to race day?
Yeah, so I typically volunteer at Pole Creek aid station. So this year it was around mile 80. When you ran it, it was around mile 20. Unfortunately, I was slow enough. I thought it would be in the morning, but it was in the heat, and you probably had it in the heat too when you ran it. So it's just a hot exposed section there. But so I know the course. So I backpacked or hiked probably half of the course, and then a couple of years ago, I did soft rock. So basically, soft rock is you run the course in a number of days. So however many days you want to tackle it. I did it in 3 days. So I actually fast packed it. So I had a 19 liter pack. And I had a tent, I had a little stove, I had freeze dried fruit and all my food with me. So I just started, and 3 days later, I finished the course. So just basically, I ran it the week of the race. So the course was already marked because navigation can be fairly tricky on the course. But they had it all marked, and I had a GPX file too in case somehow there weren't markings. But yeah, so I was and I did it the same direction I ran it.
Okay, cool.
So very familiar with the course, and really once I got into Hardrock, I have like a big map, and I have the course marked out on it. And because I've done soft rock, I mentally went through each section probably 30 or 40 times and remembered the climbs, remembered the descents, the water crossings. And so I think mentally I was so ready to run the race because I just gone through it so many times in my head just to prepare, because Hardrock definitely scared me. Even though I knew what to expect, it still scared the bejesus out of me.
What do you think that was in part to? I mean, obviously the 33,000 feet of gain and 33,000 feet of descent, but was there anything else to it?
I think the altitude. I mean, I live at 7,000 feet, so like I already have a big advantage versus like yourself, who doesn't live at altitude, or a lot of your listeners do. The altitude scares me because when your stomach turns, it's so hard to recover at altitude, especially with heat. Like in the mountains, it doesn't get hot, but if it's 70 and sun, it feels like 85 in, North Carolina, in the plains, wherever. So that was, I think, my biggest concern is I knew, like, my goal was like 37, 38 hours. And ended up at 43 hours. And most of that was honestly on day one, on Friday. I think it was in the mid 80s out there. And that is just like made the low 80s. and that with the altitude and exposure is just like a furnace. And I think that was my biggest concern, and it kind of came to fruition on day one, on Friday. Like when I left Telluride, it's a 5 mile climb. It's 4,500 feet gain, and you get up to 13.1 from Telluride. That 5 miles took 4 hours because I died on the course. Like I was dizzy. I do not like to throw up, and I was like, real my stomach was really upset. And so I think that's what scared me the most, and it happened, and I got really sick. But I was able to recover. I just moved slowly forward and got over Kroger's. And I just was like, just make it to nighttime, just make it to nighttime. Because when you're hot, like the only thing that can kind of reset you is A, getting down to lower altitude, and B, getting colder. And that section has no water to like cool yourself on. So just was kind of roasted, like really overheated the system. But once night hit, I recovered. I was able to start eating again. I also got pacers. So they just like blah blah in my ear, and was able to recover and move again.
Right on. Yeah. Well, two things there. So we're starting to get to the nitty gritties, but
Yeah.
gear choices. As I said, this is a graduate level course, but there's no mandatory kit, right? So you are
Right.
left your own devices to decide what you're going to carry. What did you decide to carry?
Um, so I kept around, I think 600, 700 calories of like spare calories in case I run out of fuel. Um, I carried a water bladder, so it typically would have a 2 liter, no, a liter and a half. No, it's 2 liters, yeah. So I put a liter and a half of water in there, and then I always had 2 bottles of scratch with me. And then I also had a little Catadine water scoop filter, so you could just scoop water because there's a lot of water on the course. So I was able to, like, even if I run out of water, I could go scoop out of a creek and have water. And then as far as gear, I always had a beanie and gloves in Ziploc bags so they would stay dry even if it rained, because typically it rains on the course. However, I did not get any rain, which is kind of amazing.
Yeah.
Or storms, I guess. We won't say rain, we'll say storms. um, and then I kept a full waterproof. I had waterproof pants and waterproof jacket, because that's like the thing when you're in big mountains, you just don't want to get cold. That just like cripples you when you're cold. You just can't move, you can't think, you lose your dexterity in your hands, you can't open a gel. So I went, fairly light on the gear. Some races do require you to carry more gear. But yeah, Hardrock being a graduate level, they kind of let you choose. If you want to be dumb and not carry what you need, then you get in trouble. I also had an emergency bivy too, just in case like I needed to take a nap or something, or just needed to take shelter in a storm under a tree or something, like in the rain. So yeah, I went fairly light, although my pack was probably 12, 13 pounds. Like it was fairly heavy. Like when they would hand it to me at an aid station, like after my like a crew spot, I'd be like, "Oh God, this is so heavy! Like, how am I going to carry this?" And then I put it on my shoulders. I'm like, "Oh, okay, I don't even feel it anymore." I'm so used to, and I train with a lot of weight too. I train with the full pack on all of my long runs, and then any like big vert day, I would train with a heavy pack. So my shoulders and body were used to it. But yeah, when it was in my arms, I was like, "Oh my gosh, like that's so heavy." But it had let's see, 2.5 liters, sometimes 3 liters of fluid in there, and then a
Yep.
lot of calories. And I had like ginger chews and antacids and stuff, in case my stomach went south. But my stomach did go south, and I totally did not eat any of the gingers or any of the tums that I had because my brain was just gone. It was like rookie mistake. I was prepared for it, but I just didn't take anything. So
Right.
even doing this a lot, you still make some of the dumb mistakes when your brain's just not there.
For sure. For sure. So what pack was it?
I use the Solomon Advanced Skin 12 liter pack.
Okay.
Just It's the right amount of space. You can stuff a lot of stuff in there. It's got a lot of pretty accessible pockets. I think you've used that before as
That's one I
well.
use. Yep.
Yeah, it just works well.
Yep.
We sell them in the store, so that's also I could give personal feedback to this works great for this.
Yes. And what poles did you use?
I use the Lecky ultralight FX1, so like the lightest Lecky poles
Yep.
with the trail shark gloves. I
Yes.
love the gloves. It just takes a little pressure off the hands. And it's like it's for me anyways a little more efficient versus like the strap, you put your hand
Yep.
through and
Yep.
set it on the kind of
Yeah.
your wrist palm
I agree.
area.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right. And
And I
then
also had a backup set too in case I broke a pole.
very
I had a
smart.
little heavier set of Leckies because
Yes.
I assumed I would break a pole because I would be a ding dog out there and accidentally fall and snap a pole, but I didn't. So
That's good. That's good. Um, and then the last piece of it, you kind of touched on some of the stuff that you carried nutritionally, but what was your plan? Like how often, how much? What were you doing for your nutrition plan?
yeah, so I train with scratch. It works super well with my stomach. So the super high carb
Okay,
scratch.
gotcha.
And I actually mix it pretty heavy. So I do 8 scoops of high carb in a bottle. And so in a 500 milliliter flask, I put 8 scoops of the super high carb, and then I put 2 scoops of the hydration. So it's almost like a gel, like it's a little bit thicker. But each bottle is around 600 calories. So like each sip you take is like 50 calories. So I have a constant drip of that. So I do two of those up front in my pack, and then I have water in the bladder. So I just sip on that. So you generally about 90 minutes to maybe 2 hours, I finish a bottle. And then every 45 minutes, I alternated between the Morton 160 gels and then just a straight goo. And then sometimes I had like fruit chews, and what else? I had paydays. So I would try to every 45 minutes I would consume some kind of calories. So my goal was around 200 calories an hour is kind of roughly what I was shooting for. I trained much higher, just trying to train my gut. I did 300 to sometimes 350 calories an hour in training, but I knew in the race I would not consume that much. So the last few weeks I tapered down as we tapered down the volume, I also tapered down the volume of calories I was consuming.
Right.
So yeah, it went fairly well. I think, once before Telluride, I kind of stopped eating. I was not able to drink much. And then because I was running probably almost an hour behind going into Telluride, the my my flasks of scratch was laying in the sun, like they had it all laid out, and they got really warm.
Oh,
Not the crew's fault, but when I got when I left Telluride with hot scratch bottles and I was already hot, I could not even take a sip of them. So basically, I did that whole section with no calories, which really put me in a big deficit. I just could not eat a single thing. And everyone, it was like maybe this is TMI for
that's all
the
good.
podcast, but dude, it was like people were throwing up everywhere around me, like projectile throw up and orange throw ups. And I was just like, I was like trying not to look, and I was like not looking down at the trail because there'd be chunks of throw up. Like it
Oh,
was because I just hate to throw up, and that section just mentally was probably the toughest section I've ever had during a race. It just without calories, the heat, and then 1,000 feet per mile kind of climb. It just like destroyed me. So
because that goes up to Kroger's canteen, right?
correct, yeah, which is like a notoriously high and hard. It's the highest aid station on the course. So they hike in an aid station and they put like climbing gear to hang stuff because it's just a tiny little pass. And it's yeah, you're at 13 more. I mean, those guys are out there, for I don't know, 24 hours or something, like
Yeah,
is the spread between like the first and last runner. And they hike water up. Like
right.
I I know they do, but when I was not mentally very sharp and I saw a guy with a giant backpack and I was like, "Are you with the race?" He's like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Yeah, I'm just hiking up water." I was like, "Oh my gosh." I was like, "Thank you so much." Like because they have to pack in, because
Right.
the stream is off of the pass, obviously. So
Yeah.
I don't know how far they have to hike in the water, but yeah, Hard Rock's a lot of the courses like that. Like even my aid station at Pole Creek, we hike about a quarter mile, depending on where the aid station is, to get water. Sometimes we put it on the creek, like we're on the creek so we can easily get water. But like, yeah, there's so much like prep that goes into some of these races. I mean, even like Hilo, like you ran, like there's a lot of aid stations that I don't know. We just can't do this without like
Yeah.
an army of volunteers
Right.
and
Oh yeah.
crew, right? And pacers. Like,
Yeah, it's insane.
wow.
Like, because we kept getting, as a volunteer, they would send out like a general, hey, can anybody go to this place? You're gonna have to hike in 3 miles, set up a tent, and that's like in rock, so it's really hard to anchor. And then, like after that aid station closed, they're like, hey, we need volunteers to go get that tent. I mean, it's constant barrage of emails because there's just things that pop up. Hey, can somebody go run water? You need a all-terrain vehicle that has this much ground clearance because you're going to be off-road. It's like definitely a huge undertaking, and I know that the volunteer coordinator this year wasn't the usual volunteer coordinator because he was actually racing. So,
Yeah.
my hat's off to them because I mean, there's so many remote aid stations and so many moving parts. It's got to be challenging. Um, but yeah, I mean, kind of getting more into the race. That Telluride was how far in for you?
It was about 30 miles, I think
Okay, so
29 or something. Yeah.
okay, right. So, everything leading up to that point was okay though. It was like at Telluride that things kind of went a little awry because of the heated up water bottles.
Yeah. I definitely was like one of my dumb things, which I even tell people, like someone doing a first 50 mile or the first 100, like my goal is to not sweat for the first 6 hours or so. But that like even at hiking, I was in the warm, I was still sweating. So I knew the effort was a little bit too hard. Going up Grant Swamp Pass,
Oof.
that's when I really started noticing I was starting to sweat pretty good. Like I felt water off my back, just sweat, not water. Um, and I think the heat was just starting, even though I was hiking, looking back, and I'm sure you looked at the training data too. My heart rate was in the 150s to it hit 160 every once in a while, even hiking. So I was just starting to overheat at that point. And then the next climb out of um, Ophir was Oscar's Pass, and then you drop down into Telluride. So I was definitely starting to like, the check engine light was on. But I was just, I mean, I wasn't ignoring it, but I don't know, it's hard rock, and I definitely probably just burned a little hot to start, and then it just really everything crumbled at Telluride from the heat.
Yeah, yeah, and then as you said, that's a brutal climb up to Kroger's. That's just a really, I mean, we came down that, but I mean, I remember coming down and I was like, oh my God, going the other way would just be a bear. Um, that's so tough, especially with the exposure up there. I mean, it's beautiful when you go through the aspen forest, but then as
Yep.
soon as you get
Yep.
past that aspens, it's like it's wide open, and it's just
Yep.
that sun's got to be because
Exposed.
we were coming through there early morning, so I saw sunrise going up to Kroger and then hit Kroger, which, as you said, it's an amazing aid station because it's like wedged in between the rocks, and they put like a canopy over it. It's just like a very unique. Plus, they have tequila, so it's just a
Yeah.
very unique
Yeah.
aid station. Not sure if you partook in the tequila or not, Hill, and how you were. I suspect that you probably didn't.
I
No.
did. I couldn't.
Yeah, Joe Grant gave me I don't know, it was like a almost like a dish that they threw the tequila on.
Yeah.
But yeah, what a unique experience up there.
Yeah.
So after that, like coming down, what's that next? Is that Governor's? Is that what's next?
Yep. Governors.
Yeah.
Yep.
Did you recoup coming off of there? Because now you're coming back down off of 13. How were you feeling when you got down to Governor's?
Yeah. So getting up to Kroger's obviously was like one of the most difficult things I've done racing
Yeah.
wise. And my plan was to not sit up there. Like in my splits, I was like 1 minute, like fill up a bottle and go. But I just had struggled so much. And when you're struggling, you don't want to sit at altitude. You don't want to be out there. So but I ended up on the open split time afterwards. I sat for 4 minutes. And I poured out my scratch because I couldn't even drink it. And I was like, can you put Coke in there? I was like, do you have a little Coke? And they're like, oh, we have plenty of Coke. I'm like, oh my gosh, you had to hike all this up here. Okay, I'll take some Coke. And they had pierogies. They were making pierogies up there.
Nice.
And that's just, cheese, potato, and pasta, whatever it is.
Right.
And that's an easy thing on the stomach. And I was able to eat two pierogies but I did figure out if I sat and got my heart rate down, I could actually consume a little bit of calories. So I did that. I sat for 4 minutes and had two pierogies and a Coke. And I said, can I take a Coke to go? And they're like, absolutely. So they filled up my flask with Coke. And that's something I've noticed when my stomach kind of goes south, I can still actually consume Coke, which is a great calorie source and a little caffeine.
It definitely came with me.
Yep. And so once I came off of Kroger's, it's really steep at the top, like, total garbage, which, a
and
lot of the
scree.
passes are.
Oh my God.
It's scree.
Both sides. I mean, for those that don't know what scree fields are, can you describe a scree field?
Yeah, scree. Yes. Oh, well, then I can't describe it. No, scree is like tiny little rock. I kind of equate it to like ball bearings. Like if you poured a bunch of ball bearings on a flat, steep surface that don't roll unless you step on them, that's kind of what the scree is. So it's just loose rocks. And they could be varying sizes. So small to like, baby head size, like rocks. So it's just loose stuff that your feet sink into and slip. And so it's very hard to stay upright. I think I fell like 3 times. And then at the bottom of the steepest part, there was a big snowfield. And there was a big, like, kind of like hollowed out spot where people have been sliding down. So I was like, oh, great, I'll just slide down. So about halfway down, I see this rock sticking out where everyone's butt just like crammed into it. And it's like right in the center. So it just went right through the center part of your body. And you can't really do anything. You push on the snow, but your hands fall through. And so you just like, boom, you just like speed bump over the rock on your butt. And so then when you get up from that, you feel like you got off a horse. Like it's very uncomfortable. But anyway, so that actually doing that, it like shot some adrenaline into my body. Cause you like when you're sliding on your butt, you go pretty fast downhill. And it kind of like brings that like kid, mentality back. And just doing that. And also I made the mistake of not grabbing a headlamp at a Telluride. And by the time I got to the top, like it was the opposite. The sun was setting for me at mile like 38 or whatever, 36 or something, like horrendously slow first half of the race or first third of the race. But I think I was really starting to digest some of the calories I had. And I was motivated to just try to make it to Uray because I didn't have a headlamp. I was like, I know I can't make it, but I'm going to make it as far as possible. Luckily, it's a big road. So you, especially after Governor's aid station there. And all I did there, I spent 1 minute there. I said, I fill up my bottle and I grabbed 2 pieces of watermelon with Coke in my bottle. And so I just like flew down that. So I was actually moving pretty decent. I think I was running like an 11-minute pace, which felt really fast in the midst of Hardrock. Which is crazy that feels fast, but it did. But I didn't make it down to the bottom. So I started walking until someone else with a headlamp came up to me. And I was like, can I run next to you and use your headlamp? I was like, I'm an idiot. I didn't pack one. And they were like, of course. So yeah, I made it down to Uray, feeling pretty good. Like it cooled off. It was probably like 10 o'clock at that point.
And mile, where are we at mile?
46, I believe, is Uray.
Right.
And so I had my crew there, and then I had some good old friends that work at the aid station, and I told them, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to be there during your shift. Well, I wasn't there during their shift because I was so slow, but they stayed and like helped crew me with my crew. But by the time I got into Uray, I was doing pretty good. Like it cooled off. And I was actually able to eat. I don't actually remember what I ate, but I remember it being really good. And I asked for seconds. So I ate a lot of food. Ate a lot of food there. And I grabbed my first pacer, Reed Burrows, who's a professional runner, because I wanted pacers that I didn't even have to worry about drop, like I would drop them
Yeah.
because I didn't want to have to wait for someone. So um, yeah, I felt good leaving there, but I was a little worried. I was like, I don't want to run because you can kind of run in town if you're feeling good, like
Right.
leaving the aid station because it's just
Yeah.
gentle uphill
Right.
in town. And he asked me, he's like, "Hey, do you want to jog this?" And I was like, mm-mm. I was like, I want this food to settle. So I
Yeah.
did not want to throw up the calories
Right.
I had. I wanted to get those in.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I think things went pretty well. Leaving Uray, it's the longest climb of the course. I think it's total it's over 5,000, maybe 50 something, 5,500 or something. I don't know what it is, but it's over 8 miles or 9 miles or something. So it's actually not as steep, which I appreciated because the first like four climbs of the race are very steep, kind of like 1,000 feet per mile kind of steep. So this is the first one that was like, which seemed much more manageable at like 500 feet per mile. Like, felt great on the
All relative,
body,
right?
and yeah, correct. And Bear Creek is like a notoriously kind of scary part during the daytime because it's like
Yeah.
some sheer cliffs,
Right. Yeah. I went through it
and
dark too. So that
okay,
was,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I had a really great. I just posted on Instagram today a really great photo that my pacer took. The I feel like the really steep sections have a little bit wider trail sections, like
Yeah.
8 foot wide, sections before like
Right.
the drop off. And he got a really cool picture of like just the sheer darkness and then the light, his light on my body, like on me hiking,
That's cool.
was really cool. So, but yeah, we made it up and over Engineer, and I started getting sleepy. We actually both were sleepy, and we were kind of eyeing little grassy spots to take like a dirt nap.
Yeah.
And I would start to like walk over to the edge and be like, no, no, I just want to get down to the crew. And I
Yeah.
was like fighting the urge to take a nap, which I don't normally take a nap during 100, but I knew, I mean, this was just a little different
Yeah,
of a
absolutely.
100.
Between the altitude and the
Um,
effort. Yeah.
yeah.
I fought
So,
it and I lost. I took a nap.
yes, yeah. Well, so I made it down to, you make it down to Animas, which used to be Grouse Gulch. I think it was Animas when you ran it too, right? Or was it Grouse?
It was grouse when I ran it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So you probably the last year of grouse. But Animus, you just turn down into that little abandoned area. But it's annoying because they're like, oh, there's the aid station. And then you turn and run like half a mile the wrong way.
Yeah.
So I was frustrated with that at the time, like
That's
the
the
little
worst.
things you get frustrated
Oh
at.
yeah. Especially when you're
Um,
tired. That's hard.
yep. But I made it down and I was like, okay, I was like, I'm going to take a 10-minute nap in the car. And I got into so I just handed him my pack. I was like, hey, I was like, will you change everything and fill up everything? I'm going to wake me up in 10 minutes.
It-
And so I hopped in the truck and dozed off pretty quick, but woke up like 3 minutes later and my legs are all fidgety.
it's
And just all like
hard.
not quite crampy, but just, yeah, super
Yeah.
fidgety. And ended up just hopping out of the truck like 7 minutes later. And they're like, you didn't do 10 minutes. I was like, I know, but I'm just ready to go. Like,
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
sleep. So,
It's hard when you're in the middle of
um,
the race, you know?
yeah,
You
yeah.
want to
So,
keep going.
yep. But then, yeah, left there, went over Handy's Peak, which is like the highest point. So it's a 14er.
Yeah.
Um,
Talk about that.
and
How's that?
yeah, so I was expecting the worst. I ran with one of the board members early on,
Okay.
and I was kind of getting a feel for him because like I was like, what about Gramp Swamp? Like is that like the hardest part, or what's the hardest? Like leaving Ophir, going up to Oscar Pass is always like that's a kind of a nasty climb, very
Yeah.
exposed. Um, and he said Handy's was the hardest. And I was like, oh shoot. I was like, I wasn't mentally preparing for Handy's to be that hard, even though I think it destroys people. Um, but I had swapped out pacers at that point, so I picked up my friend Henry, and he has done Nolan's, but that's his only 100. He finished Nolan's. So I was not worried about him on this, and I was like, oh yeah, 114er, he's done 14 of them, so he's got this. But he did have a long section. Henry had like 30 miles with me. And but Handy's, I was able to. They had it was like maybe 5 o'clock when I got into Animus. So it was like before sunrise. So we left with headlamps, but we didn't need them that long. But I ate kind of a big breakfast there. So I had eggs and bacon, And in hundreds, I actually love bacon, even though I don't eat much bacon ever. But they're so salty and fatty
Yes.
and good.
Yes.
So I do a bacon during the
No
hundred.
judgment. No judgment.
Okay, thank you. Judge free zone. But so I actually powered up pretty well. The only thing that I kind of screwed up on was I put my like daytime clothes
Yeah.
at Sherman because I thought I'd be up and over Handies
Yeah. Yeah.
sooner.
Yeah. Right.
So the sun, so I got sunrise going up Handies, which was really awesome.
Right.
But just later than I expected. And I had like a black long sleeve shirt on, and black tights. But so going up Handies, as soon as we got to the top, didn't really have any issues with it. Like felt pretty strong. I was hiking pretty strong. And what's nice is you going this way, you kind of go up and over, and then you drop down into American Basin, which is like the standard way people go up Handies. So there were a bunch of hikers, and I was like, now I got something to do. Like, can I catch a hiker? I won't let a hiker catch me. So this like mentally had a little game, and I think we ended up passing two people hiking a 14er. So I felt like mentally very strong about that because they were only doing
Right.
that
Yep.
day, and I
Yep.
had already put, I don't know, so I was probably at close to 60 miles at that point, or maybe
Yeah.
55 miles.
Yeah. Handy's about 40
And
something in for the other direction. So
yeah, okay, makes sense. Yeah. So that mentally makes you feel really good. Yeah, when
yes.
you just those little goals you can have during 100. Even if like I'm gonna shuffle to that tree. But came off of Handies and got really hot. So my pacer like helped me get a bunch of snow. I had a buffer at night to put on my ears, so we
Yes.
packed a bunch of snow in it. And each little creek crossing, I would get fully wet, but like 15 minutes later, it'd be dry and I'd be hot again.
Yeah.
And so got down in the burrows, and actually a friend that was working there too, so it was great for a little pick me up.
Nice.
Um, and felt pretty good. And then I know the next 4 miles from Burroughs down to Sherman is a freaking gravel road, and it was morning, and so there were all the people coming late to do 14ers. So lots of ATV, lots of dusty road
It's,
traffic, which I'm sure you
yeah.
had
It's like
too.
all day long. Oh,
Yeah, so I was really worried about that because I do have asthma, especially like exercise and dust induced. Like it just destroys me. So I tried to wet my buff as much as possible and pull it up over my face just to try to filter out as much dust as possible. Um, and anyways, made it over to Sherman, which I had some friends from Salida, Robbie and Shelly. They met me in Sherman, which was really great because because Hardrock is there's such big mountains. So the way that you get to Sherman from the last aid station to Animas, it's like a 5.5 hour drive
crazy.
around. Like
Yeah.
it's incredibly long. So I did not want the crew to do that, but my friend said that they would come up and just do that aid station for me. And I was like, great. So ended up changing there, and they actually rubbed my feet, which felt so good. So Henry and Shelly ended up like rubbing my feet. Um, and but it was getting pretty warm again at that point because it was approaching noon or something. And end up going up Cataract, and what did I eat? Oh, another burrito. They made really good breakfast burritos at Sherman.
Nice.
And carried one with me for quite a ways, just kind of munching on it. And um, but I knew the next section. So the next aid station is Pole Creek, which is the aid station I always work at. So that's like historically like kind of a crappy part of the course because it's the wettest and the marshiest section, is going up to Pole Creek from Sherman. But like just knowing that I get to see my aid station people like brought a tremendous joy to my heart.
Yeah.
And so kind of navigated this crappy section with ease and stayed on course there. And when I got to Pole Creek, and just like they were all so excited. They even had a chair and a sign that said "Reserved for Justin." They like had a chair, and I'm sure everyone used it. But when they came, they put the piece of paper on it, because they pack everything in
That's
there.
awesome.
So it just felt so good to see them. And those are my people that I'm with
Yeah.
every year.
Yeah.
Crewing everyone else running for Hardrock. So
Yeah.
um, then yeah, left there on a high, and I knew I was picking up my last pacer, which was Savannah, my girlfriend. And I knew at that point I was going into the night, which was really frustrating because I was like, I do not want to run into the second night. Just mentally, it's just so hard. I think when you finish, you managed not to run into
Yeah,
that
just
second night.
finished right before dark. Yeah.
Yeah,
And that was thanks to my pacer. Like he was the guy that was like, dude, if we can manage 15-minute miles, like you can finish before dark. And he pushed me. And but yeah, like I know you and I had been talking and I had been watching the tracker to kind of see. I mean, I volunteered at the finish, so I was going to be there, but we were hoping you would come in sometime around like between 7 and 8 p.m. But
yeah,
yeah, it's just, I mean, the way the day worked out, it's hard rock. You just you make
yeah,
a plan and God laughs, you know.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I feel like a lot of the times, like the plan is to get your mentally to the start line. And once you start, like you just throw that out and you
Yeah.
just like adapt to the day, right?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
whatever happens, you just troubleshoot and adapt. So,
Exactly. Yep.
but yeah, I'd say that the last picking up Savannah, I was happy to be on the last 15 miles. I knew, the back part of this way is a little bit easier. There's not as big a climbs. You're a little bit higher, but so it went pretty uneventful. I did make it down to Cunningham, so off that garbage steep descent before dark. I think that was mentally important for me.
Yeah.
Um, so I got a little ways up out of Cunningham before I had to turn my headlamp back on. But that climb leaving Cunningham is just, I mean, you ran down it, but it
Right.
is so hard.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like 2 miles and 2,500 feet or something. Like it's
It's
just
crazy.
incredibly
Yeah.
steep. And it just, because it was dark, you just couldn't see the top. So it just felt like you were going for forever.
Yeah.
Knowing it's the last climb, I was like kind of running out of my mental uphill budget. Like, um, and ended up, yeah, getting up to the top. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this is the top. And then, of course, that descent down is pretty garbage too.
Yes.
It's like loose trail and it's easy to, fall off the trail.
Slide. Yep.
Yeah, slide. And then that road going, like once you get onto the road, is complete garbage. It's just like baby head central, like
Yes.
full
Yeah.
of rocks. And just,
Rocks.
I
Yeah.
remember getting a little frustrated and it was dark. Just at that section. Like that was the only time I really got frustrated with, I would say, anything. Was just that road, just like, whoa,
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
I was,
Those
I
it's
was,
anytime. I mean, High Lonesome was the same way. Anytime we got to those
oh,
type of rocks, you're just like, ugh.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, you're mentally kind of beat up, right? You're just ready
Done.
to be done at the end of the race, especially.
Yes.
But yeah, so I finished at 12:06. I finished Sunday, no 1:06. Yeah, because you were already on shift. Yeah, it's 1:06 or something. And
Yep.
um, yeah, I think, what's it? It's been a little over 3 now since the completion of Hard Rock for me, and I think I'm still processing. Each time I tell the story, I process something a little differently. Um, and yeah, I honestly still haven't processed running to the rock and kissing it, which you feel like that would be the first thing you process.
Yeah.
But I feel like I've been processing sections of it leading up to it. And maybe it's the way I mentally got ready for the race as I'd started working at, through the course. And I
Yep.
think I'm mentally doing that now, is like finishing working through the course. And yeah, so it's such a big undertaking and such a mental effort. I think it does take a while, at least for me, to process the whole event.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm the same way about High Lonesome. Like I really haven't, I don't think I've begun to unpack High Lonesome. Um, but when you turned the corner and saw the rock lit up, what was the finish like? What was the atmosphere like? How many, was there many people around? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, so my my pacer Savannah is far more competitive than I am. Like I'm not really a competitive person. Like I mean, I didn't run in college. Like I'm just pretty chill. And there was a person in front of me that I was catching, and we got to the road, and they were just walking, and I was still able to run. Like I was able to shuffle. Well, okay, shuffle. I'll say run. Be able to shuffle still pretty good. And she was like, "All right, let's go catch him." I'm like, "No." I was like, I want that person to enjoy their rock, to enjoy that and have a moment before I finish.
Yeah.
So I was like, no, let's just walk. And, um, in the midst of everything, I still am very compassionate. I want that person to have their moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so we're just walking, and then like behind me, I see a headlamp coming and they're running. And I'm like, oh, crap. I was like, well, now I have to run to keep the spacing right because I
Yeah.
want to enjoy my time at the
Yeah.
rock.
Yeah.
So it was like a little moment of like
Yeah.
compassion and like, well, crap, I don't want to be passed now. so
Yeah.
um, so we shuffled it in. And once we turned the corner, I had several friends that joined me out like in the streets like before the finish. And then every one of my crew, including Robbie and Shelly, who are at Sherman, they did the 5.5 hour drive around to see me finish. Like you were there. So there were probably 30 people that I knew at the finish at
That's awesome.
1:06 a.m. in the morning to cheer me on. And
That's
then of
awesome.
course, Dell is there,
Yeah.
and it's kind of still surreal. I think just just got the goosebumps thinking about it. Just run, because you see that in so many photos and so many videos of people running through all the flags of all the competitors that are there that year, and through the chute with the rock and those lights on the rock are so bright.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
if you remember. I mean,
I do.
well, maybe
Yeah.
the live stream's different, but the lights were just like blindingly bright.
Yeah.
When you turn
Yeah.
around and try to look at everyone, you're like, oops, now I can't see anything. Um, but the cool thing about Hard Rock is you don't finish until you kiss the rock. You
Right.
literally have to kiss this giant rock, which is painted like the Hard Rock logo on it,
Yep.
and it's an old mining rock with holes in it, where
Yep.
they've bored it out to
Right.
do the blasting. Um, and that's literally when your time stops, and it's just a kind of a cool, interesting to kiss the rock. Um,
Yep.
and I just remember going in, like I had no plan. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I went in and just hugged it and kissed it. Like I just like, had a moment with the rock there. But well, not a moment. I heard some people are having like weird moments with the rock. I just had like a
Yeah.
hug and a kiss the rock
Yeah.
moment. But
No, it was an intimate moment, but not a overly intimate moment.
yes, correct. It was definitely PG.
That's right.
um, but yeah, I don't know. It's just because you start at the rock and then you finish at the rock, and um seeing it with all the lights, like I actually like that it was dark because it's like that's the only thing you see,
Yeah.
like you don't
Yeah.
see the town or the mountains around it or anything. You just see the rock, and it just like you realize you just completed something very difficult, something that I've wanted to do for over 10 years, that I've known about for longer. And yeah, I just like it. I was actually pretty calm. Like it wasn't like an over rushing of emotions. Um, I think because I've done it so many times, I wasn't super emotional. And I felt like I've done it 1,000 times in my head, So it was just like, well,
Yeah.
I just did it.
Yeah.
I've done this a lot of times and now I just officially did it. But it's just so cool. I love the course. I loved running down, and then Dell hangs your medal, which is now a belt buckle. They actually give you a belt buckle now.
That's pretty cool.
And yeah, so yeah, just an amazing experience, and just
That's
kissing
cool.
the rock was the icing on the cake.
That's awesome. So, when I did it in 21, you go to the breakfast the next morning on Sunday morning, and they give you your what they call your diploma, right? Your poster with your name
Mm-hmm.
and finish time. And then they tell you that you're not a true hard rocker until you've done it both directions. And that broke my heart. um,
Yeah.
not to take away from my experience because that was an amazing experience. It drives you to want to do it the other direction. But I felt, this 2021 was such a special experience. I'm worried it can't be replicated. Now, Hard Rock is an amazing race. It's an amazing course. As you said earlier, the other direction seems like a completely different race. What are your thoughts on that? And do you plan to do it the other direction?
Um, yeah, it's definitely a completely different race. I mean, I think it definitely, in my mind, is harder the direction you ran it, so counterclockwise, because there's a lot of easy runnable grades for like a mountain runner your direction on the uphill, but you have to run them, which is hard to do, run uphills when you're at Hardrock. And then the steep downhills are going to be almost as slow as you are going uphill. So entirely different course. Um, I do know now they are actually, they're not saying that you're not a true hard rocker if you run both directions. And I think it's just purely because it's so hard to get into the race.
Yeah, yeah.
And then if you do, I think, Jamil Curry, who does a lot of the live stream stuff for Air Vipa Racing, Mountain Outhouse, um, he ran it, was it 5 times the same direction or 6 times the same direction before he actually got to run it
The
the opposite
opposite.
direction?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know they're trying to get away from that like verbiage of like you're not a true hard rocker, because they even, like, Dale said that at the awards. He was like, "You are a true hard rocker, just doing it once." So they're getting away from that, but like being like a little bit like older school like
Traditionalist.
runner, traditionalist,
Yeah.
I do want to run it both directions.
Cool.
So I
Cool.
will be putting on the lottery for next year and
Nice.
like crossing my fingers I get in on the first year.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
Hard Rock does separate. They have like the nevers, that's like never finished, is
right.
one pool, which is like a majority of the people in the lottery. And then they
Yes.
have the finishers, which is a smaller
Yeah. Yeah. Veterans.
smaller
Right.
portion.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there, someone just a couple people away from me, the finisher was the 1,000th finisher ever of Hard Rock. So,
Oh yeah. I remember
not,
seeing. Yeah. That's
yeah,
cool.
so not very many finishers, in the grand scheme of things.
Sure. Yeah.
And so yeah, I think we have a lot better chance now that we're finishers, although you've been putting in for several
Yeah.
years and haven't got back
Yeah.
yet.
It's yeah. But I mean, I'll be honest, it is probably the only race, and more so because it is a different direction, but the only one that I would want to replicate, the only one I want to do again, even if I did it the same direction. I don't know if I really want to go back to Western States or UTMB or anything like that. Like, there's not many races I can say I'd really like to go back, and Hard Rock is, and like I said, if next year I got in, which is the year, same direction I did it, I'd still do it just
Yeah,
because I
right.
really enjoyed the course and I really enjoyed the environment of the race. It's pretty special. Because
Yeah.
when my runners ask me, I've been putting in for X amount of years, and I say it's worth it. Keep putting in. Like,
Mhm.
it is truly a special experience. Do you echo that sentiment?
100% echo it. I think just the mountains are just so big, and you're above tree line a lot of the time, so just the views are spectacular. And then it's because there's only 144 people that get in each year. It's a very small experience, and I know there's way more volunteers. I think there are like 400 volunteers or something, right? Like
Yeah, I think it was like
a
three times the amount of volunteers to
yeah. So like
runners.
a ridiculous amount of volunteers. So it has, and every aid station, even like the finish line with you being there, like you're treated the same as Courtney DeWalter or Francois Dane or Ludo. Like you're treated just the same. Like it's got just a family feel. And I direct races and I've been around a lot of races as you have as well. But there's just something different about Hard Rock, and can't really put your finger on what is different. It just is, and I'm in agreement. If someone has been putting in for 10 years and they're frustrated and tired of trying, put in for the 11th year because it will be worth it.
Right on. Right on. Justin, congratulations, my friend. If people want to connect with you, what's a good way to do so?
Yeah, typically Instagram is the easy way. I mean, I'm on Strava too. Instagram's just run jaywalk run. And that's I'm usually pretty fairly responsive within a couple days on Instagram. Maybe not the most responsive in the world, but I do. I'm actually still posting. I just posted my third of 5 for Hard Rock posts, just to like kind of documenting my experience.
Nice.
It's a lot, so I decided I broke it down into 5 posts.
Nice. Nice. Good way to
So
unpack it.
I'm fairly active on there.
Right on, man. Any final words? Any last thoughts on Hard Rock or anything else that you experienced that you want to share?
Um, I would, maybe the last thing I will say is I think ultra marathons in general are just a journey, and it's like life. Life is a journey and it has its ups and downs, but you can kind of unpack a lifetime of emotions in the midst of an ultra. So I do encourage people to try to do a little more, whether you're at a 5K, try a 10K. You're at a half, try a marathon. If you've done a marathon, let's try a 50K. It's like just work the distance up, because I think the mental strength doing an ultra gives you just makes you a stronger person outside of that too. Like, because if you can do that big thing that seemed unattainable a year ago or 5 years ago, it just makes you feel like a stronger, better person. So yeah, I always encourage people to just do a little more, whether it's biking or swimming, running, hiking, whatever it is. But to me, my vehicle of exploration is ultra running. So yeah, that's awesome, my thoughts.
Well, thanks, buddy. And congratulations once again. I appreciate your time. And anything coming up next?
I have Imogene Pass, which is one climb of Hardrock, which will be like a piece of cake, except that you actually have to run it. So I'm a little scared about that. But yeah, that's the only thing I have on the radar right now. Come lottery season, in December and January, I'll have something else on the radar. But right now I'm just enjoying, I typically like something 6 months out the dingle, to keep you motivated. But right now I don't. Kind of looking forward to the off season, getting back on the skis and doing a little bit more on that. So yeah, and enjoying the completion of Hardrock a little bit more than I would a normal race.
As you should, my friend.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again.
Thanks, Aaron. Really appreciate your time, man.
Congrats to Justin. 43 hours. That's a tough Hardrock. And he did it. He persevered, which is awesome. A testament to Justin. Congratulate him on the finish. It was fun sharing that journey with him, coaching him through it, seeing him, highs and lows, and especially being there at the finish. I love that. It was just what a special experience to be able to do that with an athlete. So, I really glad I could be there and sharing that with Justin. So thank you, Justin, for your conversation and for sharing the story. We had a lot going on, so going to get into what's going on in our world. One of my next conversations, I hope it to be with Travis Macy. Travis, if you're not familiar with, he wrote the book Ultra Mindset, which if you haven't picked up, I think it's a fantastic complement to something like Addy Bracy's book, which is mental training for ultra running. So I'm hoping to have a conversation with Travis about coaching. He is a coach, but he does multi-sport. Travis is actually an adventure racer, and he was on the Amazon Prime special in the Eco Challenge with his father, who suffers from Alzheimer's. And if you heard my podcast previously, he wrote a book also about his journey with his father and Alzheimer's. So I'm hoping to have that conversation early next week and release that conversation coming up here pretty soon. So stay tuned for that. Otherwise, everything else here, man, I'm really starting to look forward to training. I just got in my first run. It was with my son and the team. Really enjoyed running with him, but man, was it fast. Those guys are fit, which is awesome. It was probably a little too fast for me, but I held on. But it also made me excited about training and wanting to get back into shape, especially for JFK. I'm really excited about running JFK, the 50 miler, one of the oldest ultras in the U.S. So that is going to be in November. So I've been kind of looking at the season and seeing what kind of tune-ups I could get in, because with coaching cross country, Saturday has become a commodity, because it's tough with races almost every weekend for cross country. So what I found though was that we had a open date in October, and there is a marathon in Greensboro that I potentially could do. So I'm looking into doing that marathon as a tune-up for JFK, which I ran my first road marathon in years in February. What was it, February or March? Maybe, I can't even remember. But it was Shamrock in Virginia Beach, which I really enjoyed. it's just such a different world than what I'm used to from trail racing. So, but I'd like to get a faster time. Like to see if I can get myself under 3 hours again, crack into the twos. With some training, I think I can do it. What I have to be smart about is how much fatigue it creates, because when I woke up this morning after my run yesterday with my son, I was like, wow, like I could feel the fatigue. And if I run on fatigued legs, that's usually when I get injured. So I have to be really careful right now with that balance, kind of that stress recovery, like we always talk about. So today, is going to be more of a walk run. I've already kind of plotted it. The kids are practicing today, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go measure our cross country course. We're hosting, races on September 28th. So if you're in the Western North Carolina area and you want to come check out the cross country course and the trails that we've been building, I hope to have registration up here pretty soon, and I'll get that out as soon as I can. Waiting on a timer, and if I have a specific timer, he uses a specific registration platform. If not, I'll probably just throw it up on Ultra Sign Up. It's going to be cheap. We're not doing t-shirts or craziness. We're just doing some overall awards. So it's more of a donation to the cross country team and to the work we're putting in on the trails. Hope to build many more new trails, but I only have a quarter mile left on the long trail that I've been building with the Carolina Mountain Club. So super excited about that. I will have at least 1 or 2 more work days. So if you want to come and help out, super appreciate it. We had 24 kids and I want to say about 6 adults out the other day, maybe even more. So it was a great turnout for our last work day. The kids are really enthusiastic about the work and getting it done. So like I said, about a quarter mile left, and it's almost done. I'm so excited. So September 28th, we'll have an open 5K, and you can come experience it. I hope you can join us. Again, I'll get registration information out as soon as I can. But that's been like consuming my world right now, between coaching cross country, getting that season set up, finishing off these trails on the cross country course. I was out there chainsawing this morning, just kind of getting some stuff clear and out of the way. So a lot of work been putting in on the cross country course. And then of course my usual coaching, just making sure that I'm keeping up with my athletes and their schedules and, what they've been doing. So lots going on. Super busy, really, as always, really enjoying it. Nice to be out running again. Really, like I said, looking forward to getting back into training. Started strength training again, which I've been working with Will France. He's a strength training coach, through, I think it's Mountain Goat Endurance. He's fantastic. So if you want to, get in touch with Will, I'll put his information in the show notes, cause he is fantastic at strength training. He's also a, endurance coach as well, running endurance coach. So, you can touch base with him on either or of the both. So, but yeah, back to strength training, back to run training, trying to fit it all in with everything else going on, which, is awesome and challenging. And, but, we're getting there. So, it's nice to have joy back in my voice. I think I missed running a lot with those 2 weeks off. Near the end there, I could feel that I was getting kind of cranky, because I was looking forward to getting out and running. So really happy about that. Started wearing the Koros armband, which it's optical technology, so not perfect. It does use an algorithm to kind of assist in getting it more accurate. I would say it is probably the most accurate optical technology that I have experienced. That said, my run yesterday, it had my max heart rate up at 180, which I had a VO2 max test quite a few years now ago, probably I would guess like maybe 6 years ago. And at that time, my max heart rate was 177. So, I got to take it with a grain of salt. I know my max heart rate didn't get up that high yesterday. So, again, got to be taking the optical with a grain of salt. But like I said, it is a step in the right direction for optical technology. I've had so many problems with watches right now, which is unfortunate. I had the Vertex 2, the Coros Vertex 2, and something broke in the charging port. I tried to get Coros to repair it, but they don't do repairs in the U.S., which was kind of frustrating. They do have a trade-in program, so you can send it in and get credit for the watch, and then purchase a new one with that credit. So, taking that into consideration, whether I want to, get another Coros or if I want to try something different. So we'll see. I'll keep you posted on that as things progress. But in the meantime, I'm using one of my old Coros. I think I have an Apex Pro, like original, not the 2. And it's doing okay. It died on me during High Lonesome. That's why I had to do a post. I can tell it's kind of getting old. I bought it for UTMB in 2019, so it's over 5 years old now, and that's kind of the life of a watch. So I'm kind of getting to the end of its life cycle. So I told my wife, I said I've got to make an investment in a new watch here pretty soon. So putting it in the budget to hopefully get a new watch. So we'll see what I get, and I'll kind of keep you guys posted. Like to share those sort of things. So if you're in the same market, either if you have input and want to share it, or want to hear feedback about the technology, that's kind of why I'm putting it out there. But I was very pleased with the Vertex 2. It only lasted me 2.5 years before it broke, which was pretty frustrating given the price of it. And the fact that they don't repair it, I'm kind of like, well, do I want to get another Coros spending all that money on, this watch technology, and it doesn't do repairs. So, that's why I'm kind of shopping around and deciding whether I want to try another brand and see. I want the brand to have a repair, or a better warranty is really what I want. I mean, 2 years is good for a watch, honestly. That is pretty good, but to be just over the warranty and not be able to do much other than like trade it in for, not even half the value of what you bought it for, it's a little bit frustrating, but I understand. Anyhow, that's craziness that's going on. Also going to be in the market for some new road shoes. I want to have something if I do the marathon in October. So I'm going to start researching that and kind of deciding what I want for a race shoe and something to train in. So we'll see what that brings up. I don't know if I want to go with carbon plated. They seem to really bother my IT band due to the rigidity of the shoe. I really do strike and kind of toe off very laterally, so kind of toe off my pinky toe, and that seems to exacerbate that motion, which really tends to put strain on my IT band. So I seem to flare up when I run in carbon plated shoes. So I'm really hesitant to go that direction, thinking I want something with, if it does have a plate, I don't want it to be carbon. I don't want it to be too high ramped. It doesn't have to be 0. So, there's a lot of factors that I'm considering here. So kind of, going through and researching and kind of looking at what might, fit my foot well and do well for my foot. It's a tough decision, especially, something that you want to trust to run a marathon and even potentially run JFK. And, if I can run both in it, that would be great. Try not to buy too many shoes. I've got too many downstairs at the moment. my collection is a little too ginormous. I almost feel I do feel pretty bad about how many shoes I do have. So, wanting to buy another one for a race, I do feel some guilt. So I'm trying to decide if I have something that I can use, that I feel comfortable enough with, that I could race in, but I'm thinking I don't and may need to pick up something. I have stuff I can train in, but not necessarily my speed nor my racing. So we shall see. We'll see where that brings us to. So I'll keep you posted as I kind of go through that process and let you know what I come out with and what I think of them. So you're always free to contact me. Let me know what you've been using. Let me know, how it's worked out for you, what you liked, what you didn't like. You may have experienced a lot of different shoes and have some opinions. So, and if you just have a resource, if you've done something, if you've done a podcast or a YouTube video or a blog, about, any of these topics, please send them on. I'd love to hear, thoughts, or if you found a review that's super helpful, please pass it along. Obviously, I love reading that kind of stuff, getting insight from people that have used them. So, please do share. And if you have other conversations, topics that you want to hear about on this podcast, feel free to reach out. If you have some guests that you think would be interested or interesting, please let me know. Happy to reach out to them and have that conversation here on the podcast. So I want to thank you guys for the feedback. It has been wonderful hearing from you guys. Love the fact that you're loving the podcast, digging the podcast, and getting a lot out of it. That's my point of putting this out there. Want to thank my Patreon supporters. As always, it's fantastic to have that support. It honestly does help me keep this going. It is there is expenses to this, so I thank them for that. It helps me offset the costs and makes it so I can continue to do this. So if you want to support on Patreon, please just jump onto the show notes. You can click on the link and follow it through. For as little as $1 a month, you can support the podcast. It is helpful, and I thank you for that. If you can't support at that financial level, that's totally fine. Please share the podcast, especially if you found it useful. Share it with your friends, review it, whatever you want to do. It all helps in the long run for this podcast. So thank you so much for everything. And until next time, keep moving forward, my friends. Running is life.